Shockingly, the number one most wasted food is bread. And I think it's just because we buy so much bread in the US and Canada, and it goes bad quite quickly. So it can go hard. And so if you buy a fresh baguette or a loaf of sourdough, or maybe you make your own sourdough and it goes hard, what I want you to do with it is throw it into a food processor or blender, grind it up with some parsley, nutritional yeast, maybe a little salt, and bake it, and you have amazing breadcrumbs, homemade breadcrumbs, just like that.
Well, welcome everybody to the Switch for Good podcast. Today, Dotsie is not with us, unfortunately, and she's going to be really sad after she hears this amazing interview because we have a very special guest. She is a culinary visionary. Carly Bodrug has a passion for wholesome ingredients and creative recipes that have captured the hearts and taste buds of so many of her fans and followers. Carly's remarkable story begins on a farm where growing up eating the standard Canadian diet, which is also like the standard American diet, where meat was the centerpiece of every meal. And then in 2015, Carly learned that the World Health Organization classified red and processed meat as carcinogens. Tying this new information about cancer-causing meat to her father being diagnosed with colon cancer when she was 11 years old, Carly knew she had to change her diet. Flash forward, and Carly now has a blog with millions of followers called Plant You. And in her new cookbook, which is her second cookbook, we are going to discuss how to make easy, yummy meals using food scraps. It's called Plant You Scrappy Cooking. And I just want to say something. Dotsie and I have had our fair share of cookbook authors on this podcast. And I always want to know what makes their book different. And now you know what sets this one miles apart and what just tickles me. I just loved reading it because Carly teaches us how to use so many parts of food that we normally throw away. And today she's going to help us learn some of the tips that she shares in this new wonderful cookbook. So join us as we discuss plant-based recipes that have even more going for them than being delicious, cruelty-free, and good for your health. So welcome to the show, Carly.
I am so grateful to be here. And that was the most gracious introduction. So thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm pumped to talk about scraps and plants.
Yay. Well, I'm really excited to talk about this. I just want to say this is your second cookbook. It's just out, folks. And your first cookbook had several printings. So folks, and so you better get this one quick, folks, if you want to make sure you get it right away. So this cookbook, which I read every single page because it's charming, how the little tips and everything that you give in it. And it helps us be healthier, of course, by eating plants. It saves us money by using more of the food that we buy. And it also helps the world because we're reducing food waste. So it's a triple threat. And that's why I'm so excited. Even though, by the way, Carly, and the audience knows, I am not a cook at all. I'm not a cook, but I still put things together and eat a healthy plant-based diet. So I can definitely use a lot of your recipes in your book, which are not complicated. So start with, I'm talking too much because I'm excited. Tell us what inspired you to write this cookbook that uses food scraps in all its delicious recipes.
So obviously, as you know, a huge part of leading a plant-based lifestyle is thinking about the environmental implications that animal agriculture has. And it was just one day I really didn't know much about food waste, but I heard the statistic that between 30 to 40% of the entire US food supply goes to landfills, which is staggering. And you kind of think in your mind, okay, does that food just decompose and it's all dandy? Well, unfortunately, when food decomposes in landfills, it creates methane gas, which contributes to global warming. I think I heard a statistic today that said that food waste is actually creates more emissions than the airline industry. So that gives you a scale of how much impact this has. And then sort of your mind goes to, okay, where is this waste coming from? Is it restaurants? Is it grocery stores? Is it happening on farms? And shockingly, the largest percentage is in consumers' homes. So I felt really, as a plant-based food blogger, that I needed to talk about this. So one day I threw up a candied orange peel recipe, and it was really funny because whenever I put up a video, I kind of walk away from it because I don't want to know what the first reaction is. I get very nervous. So I walked away from my phone and I came back to it about a couple hours later, and it had a non-exaggerated million views. People were going crazy saying, "Wow, I've never seen anything like this." And that's how scrappy cooking started. So fast forward to probably now a year and a half ago, my first cookbook was out. I really wanted to write a second, and these scrappy cooking episodes, people were just so intrigued by this idea of being able to use foods that they would commonly throw away and make them into delicious recipes. And I thought, man, I have never seen a cookbook that is not only plant-based, but also focuses on reducing waste, which is this major issue. So that's how it all started, the Cliff Notes version.
I love that it's better for our planet, and was amazed to learn from you actually, because you do have a little bit in your book about food waste and some stats. And it's I learned from you that food waste is estimated to make up almost 25% of all the material in landfills also. That's
Staggering.
a lot. And of course, it emits methane, which is a greenhouse gas that is many, many, many times more destructive than carbon dioxide. So many good things are happening from just cooking meals from your cookbook. So tell us, though, the other thing that I know motivated you too was that money. We save money when we don't throw away less food. So talk to me a little bit about that.
So I'm in Canada, and I hear from my US friends this is a problem as well, but you can probably relate that grocery prices have just skyrocketed probably over the last 3 to 5 years, astronomically, really. And if we think about how much we spend on groceries per week, per month, especially people who have families, it's really nonsensical to think that we throw away almost 30% of that food. So if you want to reduce the inflation impact that is having on your grocery bill, reducing your food waste is the number one way you can do that. And I tell people we like to do scrappy cooking, and scrappy cooking is a blast to think about making bacon out of banana peels. But in reality, what scrappy cooking is about is just thinking and being more mindful about the food that you purchase and making sure that you're using it. That's where we want to kind of get down to, is making a shopping list, being really mindful about what you're putting into your cart and putting into your fridge, and making sure that you have a plan for it, rather than just aimlessly heading to the grocery store, buying all of these groceries that you don't know what you're going to do with. And then you get to the end of the week, you see at the back of the fridge a wilting box of spinach and think, oh crap, I didn't use this. What can I do with it now?
So are you saying that planning is the number one helpful tip to reduce food waste?
Planning is 100% the number one. And I like to break this down and tell people it doesn't have to be this complicated process. So I like to sit down on a Sunday. Sunday's usually when we go grocery shopping in my home, and get out a piece of paper and write down like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. It's probably great magnets you can put on your fridge for this and whatnot. And just write down what you plan to eat for the week. This doesn't have to be super rigid. It could be like, okay, I know we're going to want a chili for dinner, overnight oats for breakfast a couple of days. Wednesday, we might get takeout, and write down a rough grid. Then what you're going to do is look in your fridge and pantry and see if you have ingredients that already correspond with these meals. And if you do, obviously that's a bonus. You're already saving money off your grocery bill. And for what you don't, you want to look at how you can use ingredients in multiple meals if you can. That's another great tip. And then you head to the grocery store. Food marketing, as we know, is just incredible. And it's so easy to get distracted. But your surefire way of not is by having like a very steadfast list and plan made from your plan for the week, when you know exactly what you're going to eat. So that's my number one tip. No apps needed, no fancy cookbooks needed. I'm not here to sell you on anything. It can be as simple as writing out a list of what you're planning to eat for the week.
Well, I want to sell them on your book. So start with some of the tips that you have in there. What are the, okay, so you have this great thing in your book where if you do look in your refrigerator and you see that wilted spinach in there, you can go to your book and there's a page with commonly, foods that are commonly tend to go bad in the fridge because they're not used, and you give the recipe pages of where they can find delicious recipes to use those foods. So, what are some of the most commonly wasted foods? And can you just give us an example? And I'm going to ask you for a lot of examples because I want people to hear about all the amazing foods that I throw away that would never think to make anything out of them. So give us a couple tips of the most commonly wasted food, what you do with them.
Yeah, I've got a ton of tips up my sleeve that I think your listeners will love. So, shockingly, the number one most wasted food is bread. And I think it's just because we buy so much bread in the US and Canada, and it goes bad quite quickly. So it can go hard. And so if you buy a fresh baguette or a loaf of sourdough, or maybe you make your own sourdough and it goes hard, what I want you to do with it is throw it into a food processor or blender, grind it up with some parsley, nutritional yeast, maybe a little salt, and bake it. And you have amazing breadcrumbs, homemade breadcrumbs, just like that. Another thing you can do with bread is I love to make a French toast casserole. So vegan, of course. So we use a yogurt, plant-based milk kind of custard, add the bread in there, rehydrate it, pop it in the oven, and it is just so delicious. If we're going to move to the scrappy side of things, the number one I like to tell people, because almost everybody throws this out, is broccoli stems.
Oh my God, there's such a pet peeve when I go into the store. And then unfortunately, where I live, the broccoli crowns, I don't know, that's basically the stems have been thrown away by the store, right? Right? I mean, I don't know. What do they do with them? I feel better buying the crowns, but they're not organic. So I have to buy and I scour looking for the stems that are the least stocky looking, it's not only because I have to pay for them, which is so irritating.
Yeah, so if you're paying for broccoli stems by weight, it is so nonsensical to throw that away because they can be very delicious. So you peel off the outer edge, which is like very fibrous, going to be hard to eat. And then what you'll be left with is the inner stalk. And you can slice that into just like broccoli fries, pop them into the oven, and they taste almost reminiscent of asparagus. But a couple of recipes I have in my book, I have a whole bunch of broccoli stem recipes, but one of them is summer rolls. So I love to make fresh spring rolls. And instead of matchstick carrots, I'll slice up broccoli stem like really thinly and roll them up in fresh spring rolls. I have a great green goddess soup recipe in the book that you can just throw the whole stem in there into the blender and you're good to go. And at the end of the day, if you don't know what the heck to do with it, you're making a broccoli stir fry, you can just chop up that broccoli stem, throw it right in. And I promise you, once you try it, you'll never be composting or throwing out the stems again. It's incredible. Third one I want to talk about are your greens. So we've got carrot tops, radish tops, beet leaves. If you're somebody who likes spinach, you like kale, you're a greens eater, which anybody listening to this podcast and is plant-based probably eats their greens. It makes no sense to throw these away. They're super nutrient dense, all three of those, the radish top, beet leaves, and carrot tops. And if you don't know what to do with them, you can throw them in a salad, first of all. But another thing you can do, I have this great recipe in my new book called Scrappy Pesto. And it, again, is what I call a kitchen raid recipe. So something where you can interchange greens or ingredients to what you have on hand. So you say you have radish tops, you add a whole bunch of radish tops to a blender, you add some basil if you have it on hand, cashews or sunflower seeds, nutritional yeast, a little bit of sea salt and garlic, blend that up. And I'm telling you, this makes an amazing pesto pasta sauce. It makes an amazing dip, a drizzle over a sheet pan recipe. Just incredible. So that's another big tip. I think a lot of people I hear throw their greens away. So make a sauce instead because it will love you and help you save money as well.
Yeah, it's probably their extremely healthy parts of the plant that we throw away. Now, speaking of greens and how often they do go bad, in your book at the end, you talk about how to store some foods, and greens were in there. Can you share about how to store greens, for example? There were other foods too, but greens so that they last longer.
Of course. So, a big part of reducing food waste is actually food storage. So, you want to be mindful of how you're storing things, and greens are a big one, right? And with greens like spinach, you want to make sure that they're not being overtaken by moisture and also mold and bacteria. So you can do it one of two ways. If you get it into your house and you want to wash it, this will help reduce the mold content. But then what you have to worry about is the moisture content. So then you can give it a whirl in a salad spinner if you have one. If you don't, you're going to dry with like a clean cloth. And then I like to tell people to store in a sealed container with a clean cloth or paper towel if that's what you're using. And this will last you much longer. It will at least double the life of your spinach there. Another big one is carrots. Carrots are great if you chop them up and you can store them in water. They'll stay nice and hydrated, and you can actually bring them back to life. Like if you've ever been a victim to really limp celery or carrots, storing them in water or just putting them in water for a little bit is going to extend the life of those and bring them back to so they're no longer limp. Another one is like your herbs, like cilantro and
Just
parsley.
a question about that. Do we immerse them in? Because I've
Yes.
seen celery sticks in cups, like
Yeah, so you can do
like
it
they're
two
small.
ways. You can immerse. So if your celery has gone and it's limp, like it's like, okay, this is heading to the compost bin. If you just soak that in water, it will suck up the water and become like new again, as long as it doesn't have mold. I don't want to tell people to eat moldy things. That's not what this is about. It's about like if something has gone like a little bit limp or anything, you can still eat it. And then if you're just storing it, I was just gonna say herbs are amazing. Anything with like a root is great to store like a bouquet. So if you think like your cilantro, your parsley, you just have a little jar, add a little water, and pop that in. Put it in your fridge, and it's going to last a lot longer since it has that water source to stay fresh. And then change that water every couple of days.
My mom always tells me not to put the avocado or tomatoes in the fridge. And I want, but it's hot and humid in the summer. And so they go bad so fast. And none of us like food waste, but I read in your book that it's okay to put them in. And I told her it's okay to put them in after they've ripened.
Yes.
Right?
Exactly. It's okay to put them in the fridge after they ripened. And it's another thing is being careful about what you're storing next to each other. So I believe it's avocados and bananas. Like it will ripen bananas really quickly if you store, and tomatoes are in there too. So you want to make sure that things are stored separately. And then once they ripen, you can pop them in the fridge. And then when in doubt, you can freeze. Freezer is your best friend to reducing food waste and will really preserve. So avocados are one. I've mashed them up into like almost like a guac consistency, put them on little like mounds on a sheet pan, parchment lined sheet pan, put that in the freezer, then break them off once they're frozen, put them in a reusable Ziploc, and then you can thaw them and it will be like as good as new avocado. Because avocados, like they have maybe a couple of hours where they're at their prime, right? They're either too raw or too ripe. So
Now let me ask you one more question, then I want to go to something called aquafaba, which I know
yeah.
talk about. Is it okay? Because I did this yesterday when I was making my mom avocado toast. I took out the bad parts of the avocado and just gave her the good parts. When things are moldy, is it okay to do that, or are there secret little bits of mold I can't see that I'm giving my mother?
So I don't want anybody listening to this podcast to get sick. So I would say use your own judgment. Personally, in my life, I cut the mold off and eat it. And then it's certainly an avocado. I feel like it's not often you encounter an avocado that's like perfectly green. If it's like a little bit brown, totally fine. And you will even see an avocado, like if you make guac, it will oxidize very quickly and go brown. That's typically all that's happening there if there's some brown parts. So not too much of a concern. But if something's moldy or if you have doubt about it, that is the time to discard it. And that's okay. If you put into place what I'm talking about in terms of planning, getting a really good repertoire of recipes where you can interchange the vegetables from your fridge, being mindful of what you're throwing out, you're already doing 99%. And you don't have to be perfect.
So tell us about what aquafaba is and how you use it.
I love aquafaba. I call it liquid gold. So aquafaba is the liquid from a can of chickpeas. So if you've ever opened up a can of chickpeas and seen kind of that jelly liquid in there, this is do not discard it. It is incredible. So it actually can replace egg whites in recipes or eggs in a lot of baking recipes. And the craziest part about aquafaba is it's a meringue substitute. So if you whip it up with a hand whisk or a stand mix, it will whip and foam to the consistency of meringue, and you can even bake it to make meringue cookies. So just incredible. But a couple of uses and a couple of recipes I have with it in the book. I use it in place of eggs in a cake recipe, in a wacky cake recipe that's so delicious, and it actually replaces the oil as well and creates a moistness in the cake that's just phenomenal. I have the meringue cookies in there, and then I have an amazing chocolate mousse. So if you whip it up with some dark chocolate, a little bit of sea salt, absolutely phenomenal aquafaba. And then final thing I want to say about aquafaba is you can actually use it to bread things. So oftentimes when I'm making tofu and I want it to be crispy, you can kind of coat it in the aquafaba as a egg white sort of replacement there, and then put it in your breadcrumbs, and you're off to the races there.
Oh, wow. Who knew? What about other bean liquids, though? Do they work just as well?
So I haven't actually explored this, but I get this question a lot. I think part of the issue with beans is the aquafaba can take on the flavor, whereas chickpeas are so neutral, right? So they're not going to have that kind of beany flavor. I'm sure it's fine to consume, and it probably could work if you're using, say, a white bean for like a savory recipe, for example. But I don't know about the like sweet recipes, because if they taste like beans, that's not necessarily what we're going for.
No, you're right. Not in that wacky cake of yours. You mentioned something about freezer, putting things in the freezer, and I noticed that you when you want to make a broth, you'll use every vegetable that's left, and so you put them in the freezer for when you make broth. Do all vegetables do okay for that? Is that an opportunity for us to save, to make use of some vegetables that we know we're just not going to eat for some reason or another?
Yeah, so I call this a scrappy broth, and it actually is inspired by Rachel Ray. I used to watch Rachel Ray's 30-minute meals growing up, and she would always, and I tell this tip to everybody, cuts down on cooking time dramatically. She would always have like a scrap bowl while she was cooking. And I don't know what she would do with the scraps, but it inspired me because it's something I do when I cook. I'll just have a bowl in front of me where all the scraps go into. And rather than discarding those scraps, most of them, and I'll go into which ones I wouldn't recommend, can be used to make a delicious, really nutrient dense broth. And I like to almost compare it to a vegan bone broth. Like it will be a lot of minerals and a lot of nutrients. You don't need bones in there to create a beautiful, delicious sipping broth. So some things that work really well: onion skins, garlic skins, even the inners of like bell peppers, potato skins, any spices like parsley, the ends of parsley, ginger, garlic. All of those that have like an aromatic feel to them are going to do really well in a broth. Some things you might want to stay away from if you're sensitive to bitter flavors, and also if things can go mushy, would be like broccoli stems are going to create bitterness, potentially cabbage. And something like zucchini and cucumber scraps are just too mushy to go into a broth like this. So what I like to do, and like I use onions and garlic every day. So I'll throw all of the scraps into a bag until it's full. So a reusable Ziploc or just a Ziploc bag. Pop that in my freezer. When it's full, I'll dump it into a stock pot, add water till it's above it, bring that to a boil. I love to add turmeric. Turmeric gives such a beautiful color to this broth. And then you can add some black pepper, which helps with absorption of the antioxidants in turmeric if you add black pepper. So then I will bring that to a boil and let it simmer for however long, maybe 3 hours on low on your stove. And then you can bottle that up and you have a beautiful broth, and you've really gotten all the life you can out of those scraps in one fell swoop.
Yeah, you sure have. But, I would have thought that that would be the only use for things like onion peels or the seeds of inside things. And you have some recipes for the seeds, the inside of pumpkin or squash seeds that we normally throw away. So tell us a little bit more about things that we could do with seeds.
Absolutely. So pumpkin seeds is a big one. And I post every Halloween making savory, delicious pumpkin seeds, or you can make them sweet. And it's so funny because people will be like, oh, you can eat pumpkin seeds, you can eat pumpkin shells. And I'm like, I've been doing this. My dad is very scrappy, and I've been doing this since I was a kid. And I'm telling you, next time Halloween comes around, you guys need to save the seeds because they are so delicious. So pumpkin and butternut squash seeds, you can do it with either. You save the seeds and you coat them in a spice mix of your choice. So like I said, you can make them almost like a cinnamon toast crunch with like cinnamon, maybe a little brown sugar or coconut sugar, or you can make them savory with paprika, make it like a barbecue vibe, and pop them in the oven. I think it's probably between 20 minutes or so. And they'll come out, they're crispy, delicious, nutrient dense, and super fibrous. So great way to make use of your seeds in that way.
So such a good idea. And of course, we see pumpkin seeds being sold in stores. So it's not, but still, I think people think it's going to be so hard they're all mushy and there's fibers stuck to them and things like that. Do you dry them first, or how do you get all that stuff
Yeah.
out?
So interestingly enough, I don't think I have a recipe for this in my book, but you can use pumpkin guts as well. I've actually taken pumpkin guts and blended them with like water, and it will make a great pumpkin puree. As like scary as it looks at first, it is makes a great pumpkin puree. And then you just need to wash the seeds, make sure that most of those pumpkin guts are off. And when you pop them in the oven, even if they have some left over on it, it'll just bake right off. It bakes off really quickly. So it's not as intimidating as you might think, and it makes the most delicious snack.
Yeah, and healthy. Now you mentioned this, but bacon out of banana peels. Who knew that you could use banana peels? I just compost them. And well, we compost here, but a lot of people don't compost, so they get thrown away.
Yeah, banana peels can make an amazing bacon recipe. And I always caveat this with I don't want people to get the book or subscribe to my page and be like, this girl's crazy. She eats banana peels. Like, I'm not eating banana peels every day of my life. That's not what scrappy cooking is about, but it deserved a place in here if you want to eat banana peels. And what you can do is actually marinate them in a beautiful soy sauce marinade and bake them up. And you will be so shocked at how bacon-like banana peels can be. It is just crazy. I also, if you don't want to make banana peel bacon, I have a second recipe that uses the same marinade for mushroom bacon, also just as equally delicious. So there's two ways to go about that there. But yeah, a lot of what we discard in Canada and the US is completely edible. So I hope this opens people's minds to that.
I think it certainly will, because it certainly did for me. So I drink tea a lot, and you have this great recipe where if you have coffee, instead of throwing it away, you can just have a coffee granola made with coffee.
Yes.
Tell us about that, and then tell us what to do with tea.
Yeah. So this is one of my favorite recipes in the book. I think it's the first recipe, and it's called Common Ground Granola, and it uses spent coffee grounds in the granola. So chocolate and granola are a match made in heaven, and I am a huge coffee drinker. And I was playing around one day. I make this amazing chocolate tahini granola, and I added spent coffee grounds to it one day, and I was like, this is incredible. It doesn't have the coffee doesn't take over or anything, but it just has a subtle, beautiful coffee flavor. So that's one recipe to watch out for. And the other thing about coffee grounds that's really cool is not only can you eat them, but you can also use them as a natural deodorizer in your fridge. So you can just put them in a jar, pop them in your fridge without anything on it, and it will suck up a lot of the odor in your fridge. And then third, you can also use it as a natural fertilizer for a lot of plants. So look up which plants because I know it can have the opposite effect on a few, and I do not have a green thumb, but I'm told by my friends who are gardeners that coffee makes an incredible fertilizer, coffee grounds. So, and then tea leaves. Tea is a fun one. So you can, instead of using coffee in the common ground granola, you can exchange it with tea. If you, I don't know about you, but I've been one of those people who's guilty of like making a tea at night and then I forget about it and it's gone cold. We'll save it and you can make the common ground granola in the morning. But another thing you can do with the tea leaves, I have a great Earl Grey tea cake where we infused the cake and the icing with the leaves from Earl Grey tea bags. And it's incredible. I love Earl Grey tea. So if you're an Earl Grey fan, or what do they call it, a London fog fan, which is what this cake was really inspired by, then that'll be a winner for you.
Oh yeah, and folks, it doesn't include the actual tea bag.
No, just the leaf.
Yeah. What recipe in your book uses the most scraps?
That's a great question. So one part that I'm very excited about of the book is I made probably about 15 of what I like to call kitchen raid recipes. And these are recipes which I really think is the fundamental of low waste cooking. They're recipes where you can exchange the vegetables and produce and cans of beans in them. So say we're making a beautiful ragu, like I have this great ragu recipe in my book that's like a bolognese almost. And you have bell peppers, onions, mushrooms, whatever in your fridge. You can use just about any vegetable and interchange them. These recipes will often call for like one cup chopped vegetables. And this is really where you're going to be able to use up your food in your fridge. So I love the recipes that are interchangeable like that. And one of the best ones, I also have a recipe called Whatever Soup or whatever. I think it's called something like Whatever Soup. And it's a sheet pan soup recipe. And it's all interchangeable. So you can use squash, pumpkin, all different types of sweet potato. Interchange it based on what you have. And that makes me very excited because I want to arm people with the ability to gain confidence in themselves and in their cooking to be able to exchange items in recipes. Because these are questions I get all the time as a food blogger. Can I switch my sweet potato for butternut squash? And the answer 99.9% of the time is absolutely yes. And I want people to empower people with the ability to do that. So those would be my favorite recipes. And there's probably about 15 of them in there, which is a roundabout way of not choosing a favorite.
Well, you have 140 plus recipes in the entire book. So 15 is choosing just a small portion of them. Fruit goes bad quickly, especially berries, and berries are expensive and we don't want to waste them. They're like a delicacy. So you have some easy recipes that give them a second life.
Absolutely. Yeah, berries are one of those ones. I'm a huge raspberry eater. Raspberries are my favorite fruit in the world. And it's kind of like an avocado. Like you look at them one day and they're not edible yet. And then the next they're mushy. So if you're somebody who gets mushy berries, which I think is all of us, I have a few tricks up my sleeve. So one of them is a beautiful berry baked oatmeal. A baked oatmeal is a huge trend on social media right now, and for good reason. It's such a great way to get your oats in, which any plant-based doctor I've ever interviewed in my life always has oats for breakfast. So a great way to get your oats in while having something warm and comforting and really meal preppable. So you just add oats, bananas, plant-based milk, I think chia seeds or flax, and those mushy berries to a casserole dish, pop it in the oven, and you have this beautiful, almost like oat cake that is edible, and those berries have a new life in them. A couple of others I love are fruit leather. I don't know if you've ever made fruit leather before, but it's really fun. So basically what you do is blend up your mushy berries and pour onto a baking sheet and dehydrate. So if you have a dehydrator, that's great. My air fryer actually dehydrates. Dehydrate for a couple of hours, or you can do it in the sun, and you'll have this great fruit leather that almost resembles a fruit roll up. So that's another fabulous way. And then when in doubt, you make jam. So I love chia jam. It comes together so quickly. You just add it to a pot with some chia seeds, heat it up, mush it down. If they're already mushy, you're halfway there, and you've got beautiful jam that you can spread on your toast or make desserts with.
Wow. Thank you. That's great. We often have, berries that are in the back of the refrigerator, and it's so painful. Can you wash that mold off? Sometimes I do, and then I don't see it anymore, and so I can eat them.
You're like me, but like I said again, if something's moldy, I think you're probably best to discard it. But at the end of the day, when it starts to go off, like if you don't have time to make any of these recipes, pop them in the freezer. Everybody loves a good smoothie, and frozen berries make the best base to smoothies. So if you just pop them in the freezer just before they go moldy, you've saved them, and then you don't have to buy frozen berries the next time you're at the grocery store.
That's right. You have your own. Exactly. Good thought. Well, I haven't gotten sick from any of my
Me neither.
but you talked about at the end of your book growing food from the food scraps. If you don't want to make anything about it, talk a little bit about that.
So one thing that really excites me is sprouting. And I don't know if you have ever sprouted, but sprouting is just this amazing, impactful way to get a whole bunch of food for like very low cost in your kitchen, no matter where you are. And I mean, I'm in Canada, it's freezing here. It's not like I'm setting up a garden out back right now. We've got probably a foot of snow. And sprouting, I have a recipe in the book for lentil sprouts. And I always tell people if they're starting a sprouting journey to start with lentils because I find it easiest. What you do is just add your lentils to a jar with water, let them soak overnight, then start rinsing them and storing them kind of diagonally upside down so they can drain. Do that for a few days, and all of a sudden you're going to see those dried lentils start sprouting, little like green sprouts out of them. This is actually so nutrient dense. They say sprouts have a lot of anti-cancer properties, incredible. And you've just grown, you'll see like a little bit of lentils will become a full jar of sprouts. Great for salads, and even just people eat handfuls of them because they're so healthy for you. They've got a bit of a bitter taste. But the other things you can regrow, green onions, that's number one I tell people to try too, is like you just pop the root of the green onions in some water and it will sprout up. You can regrow some lettuce. You can regrow carrot greens. So the main idea here is you want like a shallow jar of water, and then you add either it's like your base of your lettuce, the base of your green onions, the base of your carrots, and watch that sprout and regrow. And it makes delicious food in your own kitchen. You can grow this anywhere, Canada, US, right on a windowsill, and you'll be good to go.
Oh, it's great. I do grow broccoli sprouts because they are so healthy. So I have 2 jars going. And so I always have broccoli sprouts, mature broccoli sprouts.
They're the best.
Fridge. Yeah. Yeah. So now, you took the photos in your first book. Did you take the photos in your second book too?
No, I did not. So I took the photos in my first book, and I have to tell you, the week I signed the book deal, I went out and bought a camera. Like I did not know how to photograph. I didn't know how to photograph food, let alone photograph a cookbook. Somehow I pulled it out of the hat, but it was a painful experience for me because photographing food is so hard, especially from a lighting perspective. So this time I hired this amazing photographer. Her name's Shahad, and she photographs food for a living. And she just did an incredible job. And I'll tell you, being able to focus on the recipe development and creative process as opposed to photographing and making sure everything has even lighting, it was a gift. Um, that that I will absolutely, if I write any other cookbooks, hire out.
Well, we certainly hope that you do write cookbooks. I was inspired to ask that question because at the end of your book, you have a picture of your family. You're not in it, so I thought, well, she must be the one taking the picture, and your
I
dad
did take
there.
that photo. I did take that photo.
Your dad is there, and he's the one that I mentioned in the intro had been diagnosed with colon cancer.
He's
Two
fine.
decades ago.
Yeah, it's been close to 20 years. I mean, I'm 31. He was diagnosed when I was 11. So yeah, he's doing great. My parents are plant predominant. They're not vegan, but they eat a plant predominant lifestyle and really shifted that way right when I did, which was great because I wasn't alone in it. So they actually just got their copy of the book and they're pretty jazzed about it.
Well, it's beautiful and congratulations. So tell our audience how they can get a copy of your book.
Thank you so much. So, if you're interested in getting a copy of Scrappy Cooking anywhere books are sold, please support local bookstores, including your brick and mortar Barnes and Nobles and stuff like that, if you can, because they really need us. But you can find all of the links to anywhere books are sold at scrappycookbook.com. Or if you find me, Plant You, I'm everywhere on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. I will surely be sharing all about the book. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Great. Well, congratulations on your second book. I know it's going to be a huge success.